Okay.
Okay. Welcome. We are running a tad late, but here we are ready to go. We are live. Let me go ahead and do a quick introduction. For everyone here knows, anyone tuning in online may not be aware, this is our October series where every week we are taking a different cultural issue and we're bringing in someone who's smarter than I am to give us some input into the issue. Right? We started out with Eric Hernandez teaching on the issue of abortion. Last week we had Dr. Kenneth Ray Vaughn on the issue of Christianity and politics. Next week, we're going to have Adam Coleman talking on the issue of Christianity and race. But tonight, we are very glad to have back Jay Medenwaldt here to talk on the issue of Christianity and entertainment. There is so much I could say to introduce you, so I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll get on with it. But we're very glad to have you. Let me open us in prayer, and then I'll turn it over to Jay. Father God, we thank you, Lord. We just ask that you open our hearts and our minds tonight, Lord. We pray that you be with Jay, that he can speak truth and give us a word that can help us to be better equipped to walk through this life that you have given us. And I just pray that you would help us to seek truth, to seek enrichment, God, that we can more closely and better follow after you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mark. All right, so I guess the standard introduction that I get would just to be a little bit about my educational background. I did a bachelor's of science in behavioral science. So if you stop and think about that for a second, I have a BS in BS, okay, which is really weird. And then fortunate enough to actually be in the Air Force. They stationed me in San Antonio, so I was just down the road. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. There's interesting stuff going on down there. But while I was there, they decided that they wanted to send me to go get a master's degree so that I could teach at the Air Force Academy. And so I did a master's degree in psychological science. And again, this was a little bit weird because it's a master's of arts in science. So I don't know why it is they didn't switch over from an MA to an MS, but not a big deal. So I did that, taught at the Air Force Academy, and then decided, you know what, I want to do full-time ministry. But first, I need better training and equipping. And so I went to Denver Seminary. My wife and I both did degrees in apologetics there. And again, it's a strange thing with my degrees. Their degree in apologetics is apologetics and ethics. It's one degree. It's kind of what it is. It's like an umbrella. But I double majored and also in biblical studies. So I have a double major in apologetics, ethics, and biblical studies. So it sounds a little strange. So anyway, point being, that's what I was doing while I was there doing that. I said, you know what? I really miss psychology and being back in that field. There's so much that we can add into theology and apologetics from a perspective of psychology, and there's not really many people doing that, especially in the apologetics department. And so that's what I'm going to do. So I applied to a couple PhD programs and was fortunate enough to get in here at Baylor, and that's what brought me to Waco. And so that's why I'm in the Waco area. That's what I'm doing now. I'm currently working on my PhD in psychology, focusing kind of on psychology of religion and virtue, and how do we study and know what leads people to be good and to flourish, and how do we know kind of to some extent how do people choose what is right and wrong, and how does religion play out into all of that. So that's kind of the standard bio you get when I give talks or something, and what they hear. But it's a little something that most people don't know, and what you don't hear in that is that I'm actually a performer. I'm an entertainer. So it's fitting with today's topic. And so I brought with me, to do some entertainment, a bag of Skittles, and I'm going to need some help from the audience. Now we're going to keep it simple here because I don't want to make a mess, but I've got a green one. I'm just opening this and seeing what's in there. Green, purple, orange, and red. 4 Skittles. And can I get a volunteer? Someone? Very simple. Don't worry. You, sir. What's your name? Either one of you. What's your name? Yeah. I just need someone to volunteer. It doesn't matter who. So you're willing to do it, you can stay there. It's fine. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw these 4 up into my mouth, and these 4 colors, I need you to call out one color as soon as I release them, and I will catch that color in my mouth. Can you handle that? Yeah. Okay, might be good to have a color in your mind now because it's going to happen quick. Okay. Are you ready? Orange. Ah, I missed. Sorry. That's okay. Thank you. You're welcome. Failed entertainer. I haven't practiced that one in a while, and it's the first time I've tried to do it with a mic and a beard. So those of you who may have seen me talk here before and say, who is that again? I decided to grow out a beard, and that might be why you don't recognize me. So let me try again, because the other thing you often don't get is that I learned to juggle in 4th grade. And so I brought some candy, and I'm going to give it a go to see if I can juggle. Little bit. All right, still rusty. Okay. Now for volunteering, would you like a Reese's? Anyone else? I've got these. I bought them to give out. Okay. Clearly, I'm not the best entertainer. Okay. But I just wanted to open up a little lighthearted, have a little fun, because you can't talk about entertainment and not at least try to be entertaining. Okay. I'm just going to be clear about the trying part. Okay. So, a couple quotes. Has anyone heard the name Blaise Pascal? All right, I put the dates on the slides if you don't know him. He lived 1623 to 1662. So this was before the Industrial Revolution. Okay? He was a mathematician, physicist, philosopher, and a theologian. Okay? Very smart guy. I put this book up there. You can't see it. It's called Christianity for Modern Pagans. It's from a current modern day philosopher, Peter Kraft. Went through Pascal's, one of his biggest main writings, Penn says, and kind of explains it a little bit as he goes through it. And a lot of it pertains to entertainment. And I have a couple quotes here. So remember, before the Industrial Revolution, okay, before automobiles and trains and all this great, wonderful technology and things we have today, the internet, right? A time, I have my daughter here. She doesn't know there was a time that existed before the internet, okay? I'm joking, and now I embarrassed her, okay? So a couple quotes from him. Oh, these are small, okay? As men are not able to fight against death, misery, ignorance, they have taken it into their heads in order to be happy, not to think of them at all. So they don't think about these things, okay, because they cannot be happy, okay? So they don't think about them. Okay, and then the next one, it says, if our condition were truly happy, we would not need diversion from thinking of it in order to make ourselves happy. So he's saying we do all these things to distract us from life so that we can be happy. But if we were really happy, truly happy, we wouldn't need those distractions to keep us happy and entertained. And I think that's a good mindset to have and think of. This is not a new problem. It didn't just happen because of the internet, or just because social media, or just because the 24-hour news cycle, or just because, whatever, fill in the gap from whatever it might have been, the computer replacing the typewriter, or automobiles replacing horse and carriage, or horses, okay? It's not a modern problem, but it is one that brings some new, modern, and different kind of challenges to our way of living, especially for our kids and our grandkids and future generations. It's only going to get harder and worse. Okay? So to start off, just very broadly, what is entertainment? Because it can be a big topic. Okay, so very broad, simple definition. The one that I found that fits the best is it's something that affording pleasure, diversion, or amusement. So that can cover a lot of things. Okay? Just some examples, some forms of entertainment that I think probably what hits your mind if you hear the word entertainment. Okay, so we have TV and movies, sports, games, attractions, amusement parks, that type of thing. Okay, but there's some that maybe aren't so obvious as well, that maybe we don't think of but are still entertainment. Social media and other apps. Okay, a lot of these things, maybe we go on there for information, news especially. We don't think of news as entertainment, but the news business is a money-making business, Okay, they have a 24-hour news cycle. They're on all the time. They have competition. How do they beat out their competitor? They do it by being entertaining. And that can be both good and bad, right? It means maybe they take stories that is going to entertain their audience versus another network that might take different stories, but it also might mean they put a certain spin on stories, or they tell it in a certain way, or they simplify down really important things in order to make it quick and snappy and keep our attention. Okay, so all of this goes into it, but one thing, and we're going to talk more about this later, don't be fooled thinking that it's not entertainment, because it is. It may not be solely entertainment, but it is largely there to entertain you so that you keep watching, so that the companies can make money. And there are obviously exceptions to this, so don't take that too far. Eating, we don't always think of eating as entertainment, but it is. Whether we're eating by ourselves, or we're eating out of necessity, or we're around with friends, that can be a form of entertainment. Pornography, okay? There are a lot of reasons why people might engage in that, and it doesn't have to just be pornography. It could be, we could talk about sex between a husband and a wife. That could be a form of entertainment, okay? And I put these here like this because these ones here often, at least in our culture, Christian culture, are often kind of immediately thought of as bad. Whereas we also have forms of entertainment, okay? Obvious and not so obvious, being family time, reading, music, writing, playing an instrument, or working out. That can also be entertainment, but maybe don't come to mind as well. And we could fill this list with hundreds and hundreds of things as far as what could be entertainment. And we'll come back to this in a minute. I just wanted to get that out there so we all kind of are on the same page thinking about what I'm talking about when I talk about entertainment and how it affects us. Okay, but before we go further, I think it's important thing to do is to discuss a theology of entertainment. Again, I'm assuming maybe a lot of us are on the same page, but this will kind of hopefully help make the boundaries a little bit less fuzzy, or at least clarify the perspective of where I'm coming from. Okay, so I just grabbed some basic Bible verses, nothing too controversial here. This one's 1 John 2:13. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. Okay, so again, entertainment, is that of the world or is it not? I'm not saying it is or isn't, but the point being is the love of that thing, whatever it is, we don't want that to rule us or take us over, okay? And some forms of entertainment maybe are purely just worldly forms of entertainment, whereas others maybe not. But again, a broad concept to keep things in mind. Romans 12:2, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. So again, this talks about our mind and renewing it and keeping it fresh and pure so that we know what God's will is. So we're not distracted or we're not clouded in our judgment by kind of what we just talked about before with the worldly desires and things that might infiltrate our mind. 1 Timothy 6:8. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. And so the immediate reaction might be, oh, wait. So we shouldn't need or want or desire or partake in any entertainment. And that's not really what this verse is saying, especially in the context. But the point being is we have often as Americans, and maybe this doesn't apply to any of you, but it's very easy in westernized countries where we have so much to think, oh, I need fill in the gap, that bigger house, that nicer house, that new KitchenAid stand, the newest version of the iPhone, right? This new exciting app, or I need to go see this movie or be aware of that, right? So it's very easy to get caught in that rut. And we're not saying you can't do that, right? But keep your priorities straight. What are you content with? What do you need versus what are those other things that might be an occasional relief or kind of fun or type thing? And then one more, or a couple more, Ecclesiastes, because we want to keep things balanced. So Ecclesiastes 3, and I just cut out a lot of the irrelevant sections, and it's just kind of a verse. I'm not taking it out of context, so don't be worried here, because the point is there's a time for everything, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, okay? So again, there is a time for entertainment, okay? One more on this, and this is from Matthew 11:19. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and this verse goes on, it's where the Pharisees are mocking him for doing this, but Jesus laughed and had fun and enjoyed the time being there. Okay? There's a time for it. It's just how much time and what do we give our time to. That's what we always want to keep in mind as we continue to have this discussion and go through it. Okay? Oh, sorry, I guess I did have one more. 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all for the glory of God. And in this context, when it says eat and drink, it does literally mean eat and drink, but that's also, broadly speaking, it's meant to talk about partying and fun and entertainment. So whatever you're doing, okay, no matter what it is, what you're doing, do it to the glory of God. And so keep that in mind if you're ever wondering, should I do this or should I not, or how much time should I spend doing this? Are you doing that for the glory of God? Okay? And we do need rest. We do need leisure and relaxation, right? That's why we're given a Sabbath. And there's different views on the Sabbath and whether or not we still need to observe it or we should, since the resurrection. Or maybe does it have to look the same? Whereas, hey, they worked sun up to sundown back then, 6 days a week, and they took the Sabbath off, versus now in our culture, we work less hours, right? So we have more of that leisure time or Sabbath in the evening, and all that's gray area, and that's all, or maybe it's not to you, but the point being is there is a time for rest and relaxation and Sabbath and enjoyment. Okay, so back to this list. And the reason I wanted to come back to this is because it's important to recognize what is good and what is bad forms of entertainment, and how do we balance each one of those from a theological perspective. Okay, so let's take TV and movies, for example. I have that broadly as something we might think of automatically as bad or evil. But immediately, if we think about it, that's not always the case, right? We know lots of good, wholesome TV shows or maybe videos or movies, things produced by Christians and things not produced by Christians that might be good, or things that are educational. So immediately we can think of exceptions. So it's not all bad. So the question is, how much time do we spend, or should we spend any time watching what is bad or unwholesome or might have negative side effects, versus the time we spend in the things that are purely good or almost purely good? Okay? So we want to have discernment with each thing that we choose to use for entertainment. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and just kind of go extreme for a second. So just be ready. Okay? This is not going to sound as bad as when I first say it. When you say pornography, clearly bad, right? Okay. Well, what about if it is something that a married couple enjoys doing on their own in their private time that they don't show or share with any other person? Okay. And they only watch it themselves, right? Maybe that's okay. And I'm not going to go into arguing one way or the other for that, but with almost everything, you can argue there might be a time, a place, or at least maybe some sort of way that it can be a good thing or positive thing to do in some way, okay? So don't get caught up in just automatically, oh, TV is bad, or oh, Netflix is evil, or maybe it is because of recent documentary things. I don't know. But again, there's lots of things in we culture we hear often, again, through the media, social media, news, and it gets painted as black or white, automatic. And that's often how our minds think. Right? It's very simple and easy for our minds to do that. But usually it's not so clear. There are exceptions. And so don't automatically be closed on that, especially a lot of you might have kids, or maybe looking at everyone here, maybe grandkids. What do they like to do, especially the Generation Z? They question everything. They fight against everything. They push back. It's like built into them. And again, probably from what they pick up from media, right? The point being, if you have some sort of just black and white, no, it's this way, they're going to fight against it because they often don't understand, or even if they do, they don't care to. Right? You can explain it to them if they're blue in the face, but if they don't agree with it, they're going to fight back against it. So that's why I think it's very important for us to make sure when we draw a line in the sand, because there's a place to do that, right? We have to draw lines at some point and say, no, this is bad or this is good. Okay. Make sure that line is where you think God intended it, not just what is simple because it doesn't take a lot of effort to enforce or doesn't really take a lot of thought to think about it. One example I'll give you. So I didn't grow up in a Christian home and wasn't a Christian, but I knew plenty of Christians, and my grandparents were Christians. We didn't live near them, so we didn't see them very often. So I always heard that it was a sin to live together before marriage. And I looked at the Bible. I searched the internet. I couldn't see, where are people getting this from? I don't see anything in the Bible about living together before marriage. Okay. Well, living together before marriage is often assumed that meant having sex together. And to be honest, in 99.99% of cases, it's probably happening. But by using that kind of language, just because it's simple, it's an easy way to do it, it's what other people say, that led me to even be more skeptical and critical of Christians and Christianity as an unbeliever, and was an additional barrier that I had to overcome. And thankfully I did, but I know a lot of people don't because they have some sort of barrier like that in their way where they can't get over that. And so that's why I want to make that distinction about finding the right place to draw the line and where there's gray area, accepting and acknowledging that, and trying to at least be willing to talk about that and have that conversation. Again, whether it's with your coworkers or family or grandkids or whoever. And always, of course, age appropriate, right? We don't want to have conversations. I brought my daughter today. She's 13. Okay. I didn't bring my 9-year-old or 7-year-old because I knew just they didn't need to be hearing the word pornography. And I knew I was going to talk about that. Ultimately, the takeaway from the theology of entertainment is be wise. Yes, I'm sure you all know that, but some points on how to do that, because entertainment is both good and bad. And so monitor and make sure you know what content you're putting into your mind, what the quantity of it is. So the balance between what is all good or might not be so good or whatever it is. So even news, I would argue in most cases, news isn't really all that good to be listening to or watching to. I've hardly watched any news in probably the past 8 years or so, and it's been great and freeing. Okay. I don't miss things because there are plenty of ways to find what I need to know, and things come across my, whether it's through email, through my spouse that shows up on social media. I'm not uninformed because I don't watch the news or listen to news. I'm not saying don't do it again, but everything has both good and bad. And so what's the quantity of that balance that you have going in? And here's what we're going to spend more time talking about here in a minute with the psychology of entertainment is be very, very careful about unexpected effects, because it does have unexpected or effects, and those are probably way more powerful than the effects that we are aware of. Okay? All right, so then kind of moving into the second part, the psychology of entertainment. So this is kind of how to be wise. You can't really be wise or engage things wisely if you don't know the risks and dangers or how it might affect the way that people think. All right. So how does psychology affect us? So there's a couple main things we're going to talk about. I thought this would be bigger. So these are a couple just broad terms, very easy to Google if you wanted to learn more about them, but I'm specifically applying these to entertainment. So the first one up there, it says desensitization or habituation. Another term you might hear is normalization. And we'll talk more about this in a little bit. The next one is addiction. And this relates to the third one on the list, which is the hedonic treadmill. It's kind of like a semi-technical term used by psychologists to talk about kind of our expectations, which is kind of the subpoint up there. It's the expectation bias. And the last one is psychological distancing. So you don't need to know what those are now. We're going to talk about it, but I just wanted to kind of lay out that overview and have, if anyone is taking notes or writing things down, you have a kind of quick little thing or notes you can take for things. Oh, that sounds interesting. Let me look at that later. Okay. All right. So first one, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So this is Proverbs 4:23. Okay. I shouldn't have to convince this crowd that we should obey the Bible. Okay. But what do I want you to take out of this slide? Guard your heart. Be careful. All right. this picture is what I want you to focus in on, because this picture is cropped, so you can't see what's going on. So let me go to this other one. Now, do you recognize the picture? Who is that in the picture? Hitler, okay? Now, I don't want to go extreme and start comparing things to Nazi or Hitler, okay? That's not the point, okay? But what's the crowd doing here? They're smiling, they're having fun, they're enjoying their time with him. Hitler did not just move in with an army in Germany and say, hey, I'm going to change our society and kill a bunch of people all for the sake of Germany. He didn't do that. If he did, it wouldn't have worked. By most regards, Hitler was probably an atheist, if not maybe some sort of deist. Certainly wasn't a Christian, but his writings, he talks about Christianity and the Christian God, and he used that to his advantage. The church, the battle, if you read about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, there was a big battle as Hitler was coming to power and after he came to power and throughout the war between the German church and those who had dissented from the German church saying, no, we shouldn't be supporting this. We can't do this. Whereas the German church was saying, no, it's not that bad, or maybe he's onto something, or we can't fight it from the inside. There were a lot of different reasons why theologians stayed in the church, like the church, government-sanctioned church. But had Hitler just come out and said, no, Christianity is not real, this is a joke, God doesn't exist, people would have turned on him like that. He never would have won the masses. So he came in subtly. He played his cards. Unfortunately, he played his cards well in the way that he influenced people and persuaded them, because he knew you have to go step by step. Okay, so this is that kind of first one we talked about, right? That desensitization, what becomes normal, and media works this way. Okay. In the last 10 years, what has happened with our culture with sexuality? Things that would have been unimaginable 20 years ago have become normal overnight. Okay, probably the biggest cultural change on a major issue that I'm aware of. Maybe there have been others, and part of that is due to technology, but it's this desensitization. Things are shown in the media. It becomes normal. We may not like it. We may even speak against it, but as we see it, as that becomes more normal to us and the rest of culture, it just becomes more and more and more normal until it's accepted and it's moved on. And that's what happened to Hitler. He came to power, or he started building momentum and influence, right? He did some things. Oh, that's off. Why would he do that? But maybe we're misunderstanding or whatever, right? But then that becomes normal, right? Step by step, you get desensitized to it, habituated. It becomes normal, and that's the dangerous part. That's how media and entertainment often affects us, and so we have to be on the lookout for that, because the more we ingest it, even if we're being critical. Right? Even if we watch a show, okay, that's got a lot of, let's just say, killing or immorality and sex or whatever, if we watch it and we say, okay, I recognize this is wrong, but I'm just watching it for entertainment, that's still normalized in our brain. When I became a Christian, one of the things I noticed really quick was that I swore a lot. Okay? Constant, all the time. I played hockey, it's normal locker room talk. And so when I became a Christian, I stopped pretty much immediately. I said, you know what, I'm not going to do it anymore. It's not wholesome. It's not good. Okay. And so I started to make that normal. Not swearing. I wasn't around people who really swore. It just wasn't normal. Okay. I didn't hear it anymore. I was around Christian people. And then when I would go back to an environment, I remember one time it was probably months since I heard a swear word. As in this environment, I heard people start swearing. As back with like some of my old teammates. Whoa, that's weird. Like it caught me like really off guard and was so strange. But it was like, I guess that's normal in our culture. Why should I be shocked? It's like, it's good that I am in the one way, but it's also like, this is how culture works. This is amazing how these things affect us so quickly and easily. Okay. Big takeaway here is our brains operate on cruise control. Okay, they're just going along and they pick up and accept what is happening very quickly and very easily. All right, so we're going to do a little exercise here just to illustrate. I have lots of different ways we could illustrate the ways that our mind is on cruise control or that our systems mess up, but we're going to watch this video. pay close attention, okay, is actually I'm going to call her my model, is my lovely wife. We did filmed a couple of these videos, but the one that she did was much better than mine, and maybe I'm biased on that. So we'll watch this video, and then I'm going to ask you a question afterwards. Everyone ready? All right. Anyone want to tell me what sound they heard? Fa. Everyone agree? Hands up. F sound. Okay, I have one dissenter. Did you hear something different? Or you just want to raise your hand?
Oh, I said.
Oh, you did say fa? Okay. All right. That's okay. No. Okay. So now we're going to watch the same video again, but don't look. Just listen. Look down, look to the side, whatever. Just don't watch the video. What'd you hear this time? Ba with a B. Okay. So our systems are so ingrained, our hearing and our eyes. And so this is an edited video. It's been tweaked if you didn't figure it out by now. So it's a video of an F, fa. Okay. So that's a video. That's the visual system you're getting. But the sound, it's dubbed over with the ba sound. So that's why you hear ba with a B when you don't look. But when you watch, you hear an F. And here's the thing. It's such a powerful effect that now that you know it's going to happen, we'll watch again, and it's still going to trick you. You're still going to hear the F. Did everyone still hear the F sound? I see heads nodding. Yeah. Okay. So that just kind of illustrates. There's a lot going on here, a lot that it illustrates, but our minds are doing all kinds of things unconsciously, some of which we can't control. We get some unconscious effects that we can be aware of, and we can control it, and we can minimize it or completely negate it. So another common exercise I often do when I'm teaching these types of things is I will put a set of 6 stocks up on the screen. I think I might have done this last time I was here. I don't remember. So these six random stock names. I say pick 3 of them, and most people will pick the 3 that have that look like they're an English word. So I think one is like Len, one is tan, the other is SAR or something. Okay, versus the ones that's like QLX. Okay, QLX just seems weird and strange. Okay, and so we don't pick that because it's unfamiliar, it's strange. Again, that's our mind just kind of operating simply on cruise control. That's one we can combat. We can say, hey, I know that new things, that strange things are going to make me feel uncomfortable, and that I'm less likely to accept them as true or to think about them or to give them consideration because it makes me feel uncomfortable than things that are more familiar. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. And so when you know that and you encounter something new, you can combat that. You can say, no, wait, I'm going to give this more attention. Whereas an effect like this, it's so automatic that our brains can't overcome it. Even the researchers who study this, they say after doing it for 20 years, it still works on them. Okay, it's so powerful, and that's just how our minds work. We want to accept and go and work on cruise control, make things easy. And unfortunately, that leaves things open to affect us when we're not expecting it, or even if we are. Okay. So for desensitization and habituation, okay, what we fill our minds with affects us. We can't avoid that. We can be aware of that, and we can be aware of how it is, and we can minimize it. But when we are putting things into our mind, it's going to affect us. And so we have to know that so that we can cut it off before it happens. Okay? I do apologetics ministry. Doing that means that I have to read things like Richard Dawkins and Atheist. That affects my mind, okay? Sometimes maybe for the better, actually, because it makes, well, that's why I do it, because I'm hoping it affects me for the better. But it does likely have other effects that I'm not aware of, and so I'm constantly trying to combat that by reading other Christian things or searching things further, or when I read these authors, right, I fact check them. I don't just say, oh, well, Richard Dawkins says this, it must be true. But I also do the same thing when I read Christian authors, right? So that I'm trying to come to a good understanding of truth and comparing and looking at this, okay? but we have to know that what we put into our minds is going to affect us. And that's why there's certain shows or movies and things I just don't watch. I'm sure it would be really good and entertaining, but I know those things will affect my mind, and I can't, once it's there, I can't take it out. It's not like we can just do surgery, go out and just pull that little bit out. We can't do that. Okay, how does it affect us? So one way is through language. The language we use, choose to use, the language others use, that affects us. Okay, our morality, it affects our views of morality and what's right and wrong. It even affects our biblical interpretation. We like to think, especially here in America, that we just read the Bible for what it is and we have a perfectly good objective reading of it. But if you start to read other theologians, if you read the church fathers, you read throughout history, you find that, maybe we're not so clear, or maybe it's a little more complex than I thought. Well, as we ingest these other sources or things, especially when it's unconscious, those affect how we read and interpret the Bible. And we always want to keep that holy and pure and right way. And so what we are entertaining ourselves with could be affecting that, for better or worse. Or, some things are neutral as well. All right, so the next one, the reward system. So very broadly, our brains kind of have a reward system. The main reward system, how it's talked about in the literature, there's a part in your brain kind of in the middle called the nucleus accumbens. So it's often just referred to as the reward center of the brain. And so when we get a reward, when someone says good job or gives us a hug or we eat a piece of candy or we watch a TV show, all these different rewards and fun things and entertainment, it all hits the system the same way. Drugs, right? No matter what, it just gives a release of dopamine to that center of the brain and makes us feel good. And so this is largely what's happening with addiction. When you have a physical substance with addiction, it starts to affect other parts of your body as well, where your body sometimes may need that. So the simplest might be a caffeine addiction. You get addicted to caffeine, you go without it, you start getting withdrawals and feel shaky, but it's nothing too dangerous. Whereas severe alcoholics start going through addiction, it can actually be dangerous because their system needs that drug. They need to wean off it. But these empty boxes, you could fill those with anything. Gambling, sex, pornography, food, driving fast, right? Social media, that's a big thing now, social media addiction or addiction to your phone. So you could fill that with lots of things. It's all kind of working the same way, at least in the brain. Maybe not through the rest of the body, but in the brain. So that relates to then what we call fun. Does anyone think roller coasters are fun here? No one? One person? Okay. I don't think they're fun. And it's not because they're scary, okay? It's just because essentially I've had better, all right? And so this is a picture of the Centrifuge down at Brooks, what used to be Brooks Air Force Base down in San Antonio. I was stationed there. I worked there for 2 years. And while I was there, I rode in this thing as a test subject. And so this just whips you around really fast, and you're going super fast where you have to strain your legs and squeeze your muscles to keep the blood from falling out of your head. And if you don't, you pass out. It's exhausting, but it's also exhilarating, and it's way more fun than any roller coaster. And so I noticed this, I went on this, I was riding it, really fun. I enjoyed it. The first time I went on a roller coaster after, I'm all excited. I'm like, I love roller coasters. Then we start going, I'm like, oh, that's it? That's the hedonic treadmill. Hedonic meaning the things that are fun, enjoyable, right? What happens and how our minds operate is we have some experience, right? It's fun, it's good. We get a bigger house, we buy a new car, right? That becomes the norm for us. Whatever it is, that becomes the norm. And so then when it's time to get a new one or do something else, right? Our standard, this is our standard. And so now we want the same or usually a little bit better. And then once we get that, now that's our standard. And then a little bit better, a little bit better. And it's really hard to overcome. And it creates expectations. I put Narnia on here that could have done it with 100 different books and movies, but has anyone read a book and then watched the movie and been really disappointed? Yeah, we've all been there before. Why? It's expectations, right? expectation that we have, often from this hedonic treadmill, right? We have this great thing, right? It's exhilarating, it's great. And then we expect something else to be similar or reach that same level, and it doesn't, and it falls flat because we have these expectations. And again, that happens with entertainment. We hear great sermon, and then the next sermon, not so great. It's like, right? That's part of life. It happens, okay? But then when we're constantly filling our minds with things that are more fun, more entertaining, but whatever, like you name your adverb or adjective, right? How great it is. And then we go to something that doesn't quite make the dopamine fire to the same level in our brains. We're just kind of like, I'll go to this instead. And I'll start spending more time there. And so we have to always be aware of that and combat it. This clip here, or not clip, but pictures from Jurassic World, if you've seen the movie, there's this great line in there. And this is, I think, sometimes why movies exhilarate us so much, is because they often do such a great job of understanding the human condition. And so they're talking about creating this new dinosaur. They're splicing together different dinosaurs and said, nobody cares about dinosaurs anymore. They've seen them. They want something new and bigger with more teeth, right? No, we don't have dinosaurs. We haven't done that. But I guarantee that is what would happen if we were able to bring dinosaurs back. They'd be around for 10, 20, 30 years, and we would want bigger and better and more and new experiences in them or with them or whatever, because we're never satiated, right? We're on that hedonic treadmill all the time. So we have to recognize that and step off and take back. Our minds constantly crave bigger, newer, faster, better, easier, whatever it is. That's what our minds want. So the first step, be aware of it. We can combat that. All right, last one. I'm going to tell you a little story. Use the wolf. Has everyone heard the story, the boy who cried wolf, or the girl who cried wolf? I teach in my house the girl because I have 3 daughters. So we talk about the girl who cried wolf. And my youngest loves it. She said, Daddy, can you tell me that wolf story again? Okay, and so I tell her that story. Why have stories like that stuck around? They're entertaining, right? And that's not a problem. It helps us remember. Our minds remember stories better than they remember facts. That's almost like, I'm very confident that's why God inspired the Bible through stories rather than just, here's the 634 commandments, right? Or here, follow all these rules, right? Stories captivate us and they entertain us and they make us feel good and they bring us together and they stick around for a long time. And that is good, right? It's helpful and beneficial. But what's the downside? And so the term here I'm using is psychological distancing. When we're distant from it psychologically, when we watch or listen to these stories, right, we're saying, okay, that's happening to them. That's out there. That's different. That's not me. Okay, that's this topic. It's not that topic, right? When we're stepping back and we're not thinking, we're not integrating these things, they affect us. And this is why those other things work and how media and entertainment can affect us so strongly, is because we think we're above it. We think, okay, I can handle this. I know better. It's a great skill, psychological distancing. So it's being able to step back from yourself and look at things. It helps us cope with difficulty. It helps us be resilient. But on the downside, if we watch a movie or listen to a story or engage in some form of entertainment and we let our guard down, because that's what happens in these cases with psychological distancing, with beneficial things. With negative things, the psychological distancing helps us kind of work through it. But with things that we consider beneficial, the distancing works and kind of we let our guard down and okay, it's just fun. It's just this little thing. And that's where it has that danger to really affect us. And that's where, the hedonic treadmill can come in and the expectation bias and our desensitization. It's kind of works through these because these different terms that I brought out all kind of work together. So the conclusion of all of this, right, the benefits, God designed our minds to work this way. It's a good way. It's beneficial. We're very adaptable and resilient. That's the benefit. The downside is it also makes us very adaptable. We adapt very easily to new and better things, and that becomes our new expectation. Okay, so when we adapt to that, it leads to all kinds of damaging things such as dependence or expectations or compromise, in this case, compromise of, say, our morals, and we don't even realize it. We may have a moral view on something, we may be very firm in it and probably even right. and then we're desensitized, we're habituated, we see that, okay, everyone else is doing it, and we say, okay, well, everyone else is doing it, doesn't make it right, but it just becomes more and more normal. We see it normal around everyone else, and before we know it, it's like, well, maybe that's still wrong, but this is okay. And then it's that next step, well, yeah, that's okay, but maybe this is okay too, okay? And we should be reasoning and thinking that way and trying to draw those boundaries, but the more that we are desensitized, the more likely we are to shift from finding that good middle right ground to going into and compromising what is actually right. So some quick tips for you to help avoid having the negative effects of entertainment, because I want you all to have fun and have entertainment and leisure and enjoy the things that we should enjoy, right? There's a time to be merry. There's a time for entertainment. Some ways to do that. So first is grace and growth. Have grace on yourself wherever you are now, or if you watch something, you're like, oh, well, I didn't know that was going to be in there, right? Have some grace on yourself, okay? But also always try and grow. You don't have to be Jesus today, okay? But he is what we should be working towards, okay? And as long as we're walking in that direction, maybe even running in that direction or even crawling in that direction. Life goes through seasons, right? We should be heading in that direction. Don't say I can't get there, so I won't or I'll never try. The other is consider fasting. We often hear fasting talked about in terms of food, fasting food, but it doesn't have to be that. Take a social media fast. Take a news fast. Go a week or a month without watching the news and see what happens to your mind when you turn it back on. You're like, oh, whoa, I can't believe this is what I used to fill my mind with. Even in news, I'm talking not just like morning news and evening news, CNN, Fox News, the political shows on, the radio or TV or whatever, all that broadly is what I'm referring to as news, okay? And again, it's not that it's bad, okay? But we want to make sure we keep it in check and that it's not controlling us or affecting us in negative ways. The other one is set limits and boundaries. So limit the amount of time you have or what you decide you will watch in the first place. And then with those things, boundaries around it. So how much time are you going to spend on social media or whatever? Set those things ahead of time and then stick with it. And then the last one is redirect. Say, hey, I want to have fun. What should I do? Don't just do something simple and mindless that might be negative. There are lots of productive ways that you can be entertained. And so try to find some of those. Sometimes it takes a little work, but it's worth it. So try and find, if we go through the list of all the different entertainment things, try and find things that are more productive or enhancing or God honoring, and try and spend more time there. Redirect to that direction. And that is it. Does anyone have any questions? There's got to be a couple questions. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, it is. It's hard. So there's a couple things to keep in mind, because that's one of those things where we want to make sure that we're having that nuance and balance, because we often hear about the negative effects of phones or technology, right? But it's not the thing itself that has a negative effect. It's what is done on it, right? So if you gave your 2-year-old a phone and she was going through and reading it, that would probably have no negative effects. Now, I'm going to be realistic. I know your 2-year-old's not reading on there, but there are different kinds of educational games and programs and things to use on there. For my kids, we got them the Amazon tablets, which I wouldn't recommend. They're awful. They just didn't work well, and really bad on what you can do as a parent to control things and manage it. It's almost like they intentionally wanted to make it tough for parents to control what goes on the kids' devices. But for the first probably 2 years we had those with my kids, is I only put games on there and allowed them to have games on there that required them to think or learn in some way. And I was somewhat liberal on it, but a lot of problem solving games, on there that require them to think and solve problems. So one of which is like it's a bunch of pipes, and you have to figure out how you can make a trail with these different pipes without having them cross, right? It's a pretty fun game they enjoyed. Okay, probably not as fun as some other game where it's just click, 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 or watching different things, but it did require more thinking. So there's a balance. It's hard. I don't know if there's an exact answer. If you watch the movie, the documentary Social Dilemma, touches on that a little bit. It's about some of the people who helped design, some social media and iPhones and things like that, and how they intentionally tried to make these things addicting, right? And so that's a little bit of an eye opener as far as like what they do and what goes into that and how it affects us in ways that a lot of us don't expect. But yeah, it's hard. So say maybe find ways in which you can use the device with her. You said her, right? So sure, you can use my phone, and then have her sit on your lap, and you do that, and it's an engaging thing you do together. And then the things you do on there, what are you doing on there? So YouTube Kids is an app you can get where they only have a set thing of channels they can watch from, and you can program that in, or you can choose apps that require some sort of learning and thinking, and you can do that with her, and it can be timed together, and that's going to lead to more beneficial effects rather than just leaving the kid to do it by themselves and download what they want and play anything. That's where you're going to get more of the negative effects. Good question. Any others? So a lot of this comes from just typical stuff through my studies and schoolwork. That I guess that's the thing I love so much about psychology is like everything I read, I'm getting paid to do this research and learn it and do it. But it's like, if I wasn't getting paid to do this is what I would be spending my own time to do and learn about, because it's so interesting. And I just find it so fascinating the way in which a lot of this affects people, or parenting, right? So I'm reading articles for research all the time, especially with like the psychology of religion stuff and how it affects kids. I'm like, this is what I want to know as a parent. This is what I would be reading as a parent on my own, but now I get to go deeper in it, and I'm getting paid to do it because of my field. And so I feel so blessed and beneficial to have that opportunity. And so the information's out there. You just have to decide to spend the time doing it, and then also know where to find it. And I can give later a recommendation of all kinds of books that relate tangentially. So one thing that's really interesting is that we can learn things. We're pretty good at learning and picking things up, but we're generally pretty bad at integrating different things. And so a lot of the books I recommend to people on psychology to use for apologetics, they don't talk about apologetics. They're not written by Christians, but they have relevance for how you defend your faith. And so I have to be very clear with them. As you're reading this, constantly think about, how can I use this to be in my faith? How can I use this to evangelize and be more effective as an evangelist? Or how can I use this information to learn about my biases in the way that I read the Bible, so that I can understand really what the text is saying and know Jesus better? But we have to be very intentional about that, because we often don't do it automatically. Any other questions? I'm a teacher, so I'm okay with uncomfortable silences. I can wait for one or two more.
Just everything you listen and hear on mainstream media is wrong. It's biased, and it's not right. And then you were talking about, the effect would be, you're watching the world news and it's not right, and then your blood pressure's going up. You're getting mad, you can't sleep that night.
Yep.
It just goes on and on and on. So after 8:30, 9, we try not to watch YouTube and all that other. I mean, YouTube's okay, with the, but turn on world news, it's not.
And then after a while, nothing shocks you.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that, it's not true.
Yeah. Well, even the things that are true, it's kind of like, well, Is that the true reporting of it? Or even if it is, it's kind of like, well, is that beneficial or why does that matter? So one thing I didn't talk about is called the availability heuristic. So when we hear things more often, it's more available to our mind. So we're more likely to make judgments based on that information, even if it's not likely. So the classic example is kidnapping. I grew up in the time of stranger danger. Oh no, look out, you're going to get kidnapped. I could count growing up in my like 5-6 times where I was like, I had someone chasing me and I was almost kidnapped. And it's just, thank God I got home. Well, no, like that was probably me as a kid reading into the situation because of what I was told by my mom, who picked stuff up on the news, who heard about it all the time. In reality, kidnapping is extremely rare. It's almost guaranteed that none of those instances where I thought a car was following me, that anybody was. Okay. But because we hear this all the time, that's what we protect and think about, and what we teach our kids stranger danger. In reality, if your kid is in harm or they're by themselves, the most likely thing they should do is ask an adult for help. 99.99% of the time, that is going to be the right thing to do. But because of this 0.000001% chance of something happening, we teach them on that fear, based on that, to fear all these other people, and it leads to detrimental outcomes. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a big thing that affects us, is having world news, especially the bigger the scope of news is, right? It affects our mind as far as what we think is more or less likely to actually be relevant to our lives. And that can affect, then again, our decision making. Mark, do you have anything? Do we have time for one more? Or how do you want to do it? Are there any questions from YouTube? Okay. If anything does ever pop up, I'm happy to ever talk to anyone over email or phone. You can find my information. It's pretty easy to find online. It was funny you mentioned, how do we start that movement? The documentary, The Social Dilemma, says at the end, follow us on social media. Just kidding. And they say just kidding, although they do have a Twitter account, because that's where our world has gone. You can't really do much in our world anymore without doing it through social media in some way. So it's hard. Get on social media to get off of it. So that's why, like, more realistically, let's set limits and boundaries on how we do these things, and manage it, and be aware of the implications, and be honest about it without sounding alarmist on the one hand, but without completely ignoring it and pretending, it doesn't affect me because I know better. It does. Things affect us even when we don't think it does. I guess that's it then. You want to wrap us up, Mark?
Did you meet me up there?
I probably did.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, back on, please. Yep. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay. It's funny talking about several of those things. I was thinking, this is a really long-winded way of saying garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah. The big thing, though, is I would say is that sometimes we don't recognize just the extent to which the garbage in affects us.
Yeah.
We think we pass it out, or we can be wise or discerning, but it still affects us much more than we think it does.
I was last night, I watched the first Avengers movie. I rewatched it again for, I don't even know how many times now. And the reason I decided to watch Avengers is I pulled up, the app, and I was looking at the Marvel movies. And at first I thought, I looked at Iron Man, and it actually occurred to me, no, there's not enough action. But if you actually watch the progression, if you start, Iron Man is mostly story. Like, a lot of the action is, like at the end kind of a thing. And then by the time you get to Infinity War and Endgame, I mean, it's just like constant action. It's bigger. There's bigger explosions, bigger things. The fights are more, and it's like, having now seen all of those, probably more than I should have, going back and watching an earlier one, it was like, this is kind of tame.
Yeah.
And so, so hearing you describe that, I'm like, that just happened to me. Like last night, I was watching something going, that's pretty good. Whenever it first came out, it was like, that's amazing. But now it was,
That's one of the examples I was going to use is talking about just going back and watching an older movie, not even from necessarily the same genre, but you watch them, it's like they're real slow and you're boring. It's like, wait, is something going to happen? Come on. It's like, but that was exciting then, not anymore.
So good stuff. Okay. We're about out of time. We're actually over time. So let's go ahead and I'll close this out with prayer and thank you very much. Father God, we thank you. Lord, we just thank you that you have designed our minds in such a way that can be of such great benefit. But yet, Lord, you have called us to be stewards of this gift. God, I just pray that you would help us to be able to be a people who use it wisely, who are aware of what we are putting into our minds. God, that we be a people who do rejoice, that are full of merriment and celebration, that we see the blessings of life around us, and that we do partake of the good gifts that you give us and the entertainment that is out there, God, but that we do so with an eye to honoring you, and that we can be people who follow after your teachings and the way you would have us live our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.